It's recap time. I bring you one more recap. Today I'll explain a horror mystery movie called The Jester from the year 2023. So let's start. The film opens with the Jester appearing behind a man named John as he walks on an empty street. Simultaneously, John starts seeing a fabricated projection of his daughter's childhood version everywhere, prompting him to call her. He tries apologizing to her for the past mistakes, but his daughter, Emma, becomes offended instead. She cusses at him while claiming it's too late to apologize, and she hangs up the phone. John accepts that he's failed, which makes the Jester put a rope knot around his neck. The knot tightens each second. The Jester tightens his own tie and eventually hangs John mid-air until he dies. He then throws his dead body into the river. The scenes are then cut to John's funeral, where his daughter Jocelyn, from his second marriage, is seen. Jocelyn's friends show up to give their condolences the minute Emma walks away. Emma's mother calls her and asks about her whereabouts, so she reveals she is going to meet Jocelyn afterwards. Before walking out of the cemetery, Emma unintentionally catches the Jester dancing in front of John's casket. Later, two old dudes from the funeral service show up to wrap things up, but the Jester messes with them too. He keeps showing them his tricks and disappearing the minute they decide to call the cops on him. At last, one of the men falls to the ground and dies due to the Jester tying together his shoelaces. The other man calls the cops, but the Jester makes him choke to death on a full-size apple. The next night, Emma shows up at the town's local bar to see Jocelyn. At first, the two get along well while discussing life routines, but when Jocelyn shows her the picture retrieved from John's body of little Emma standing beside him, things go south. Emma acts rudely, claiming John left her mother and her in misery for a new woman, Jocelyn's mother. She leaves the picture behind with Jocelyn and walks out in rage. Left behind, Jocelyn walks up to the bartender to pay the bill and comes across a former co-worker of John who says unholy stuff about John, calling him a secretive man with lurking demons. The bartender hushes the inconsiderate co-worker in front of Jocelyn to prevent her feelings from getting hurt. Jocelyn excuses the bartender and leaves. On the other hand, the Jester approaches Emma and asks her to pick a card. She thinks of him as an ordinary man wearing a suit on Halloween night and walks away. When he approaches her for the second time, she runs into a grocery store, from where she watches him wait for her outside. The Jester now takes a little stroll on the streets and comes across two kids, one of whom is taking more than one candy from the neighbor's candy bowl. He teaches that kid a lesson by taking all his candies and giving them to his younger brother, who is a good boy. He then scares the boy by grabbing his wrist with his hand, which is separated from his body and inside the candy bag. The children fear him and run away, learning their lesson of not stealing again. Back on Jocelyn's side, she puts on a horror documentary and blows a joint until her friends Liam, Madison, and Alexis join her. They sit down with her, blowing joints together. Meanwhile, Emma buys liquor from the store, where the clerk tries to extend her stay by asking her little questions. She gets annoyed by the clerk, so she quickly pays for the bottle and walks outside, only to be approached by the Jester after walking a few blocks ahead. Meanwhile, Jocelyn's friends try to take her to the Halloween festival, where her father used to take her every year, but Jocelyn refuses to go. Outside, Emma finally recognizes him from the funeral and finally picks up one of the cards he's offering. He puts the cards back, shuffles them for Emma, and asks her to pick the first card. Back on Jocelyn's side, she claims that she still feels her father's presence around her, yet she doesn't believe in spirits. When Emma picks the first card, it turns out to be the one she had selected in the first place. Despite that, she isn't amused, so she walks away. Back in the house, Liam agrees with Jocelyn and ends up telling a story, which indirectly offends Jocelyn. She goes to the bathroom, and on her way out, she sits closer to her father's photo frame, in which he's sitting on a couch that's currently right behind Jocelyn. Suddenly, John disappears from the frame and appears right behind Jocelyn on the couch. Jocelyn catches his reflection in the frame and becomes scared, so she runs back to her friends and agrees to go to the festival. Outside, Emma feels the Jester walking behind her, so she turns around and pushes him back in frustration. The bottle in her hands falls to the ground and breaks. The Jester picks up a piece of broken glass and shows it to Emma. She becomes paranoid, thinking that he's about to hurt her, so she acts brave and invites him to slice her throat, but the Jester messes with her by slitting open his throat. His blood splashes onto Emma's face, traumatizing her. It gets worse when the Jester gets back on his feet. As she runs away, the scene spins back to Jocelyn, who acts cool at the festival despite being traumatized by John's suicide. Her friends ask if she's okay with joining them in the scare maze, and she casually agrees to it. Inside the maze, she catches a glimpse of someone who has hanged himself. It reminds him of John's suicide, so she starts panicking. When her friend Maddie approaches her from behind, she gets further scared and starts jumping with fear. Maddie takes her out and tries to calm her, but she gets a meltdown, during which she reveals she's left alone in this world, now that both her parents are dead. She also confesses that Emma is her last family member, but she's turned out to be cold and distant, which truly makes her alone. Meanwhile, Emma rushes back to the store and tells the clerk what she's witnessed, but he doesn't take her seriously and threatens her to get out. She takes a moment and goes to the bathroom to clean the blood from her face. When she comes out, she finds out the clerk has called the cops on her. They politely try to tell her she must have been drunk enough to mistake an innocent prank for something so dreadful, which only presses Emma's button. The cops finally believe in her when the jester barges into the store, giving the cops a tough time with his handcuffing trick. He handcuffs his wrists, but when the cops look at them, the cuffs transfer onto theirs, tying the two cops together. He then puts a hat on one of the officers' heads and makes it disappear. Fear wreaks havoc on the place, which causes the clerk to run away. When Emma tries to escape, the jester makes sure she slips and falls to the floor unconscious. In the meantime, he plays with the cops by making one shoot the other. When the remaining cop tries to shoot the jester, he stops the bullet with his bare hands. Emma finally gets up and escapes successfully, but the jester goes right after her. Back at the festival, Alexis is too busy fighting the worker on the counter, who is out of the drink Alexis wants for now. Maddie tries to tell her they need to take Jocelyn back to her house, but Alexis ignores her. She goes back to Liam and asks him the same thing, to which he agrees. Maddie goes back to Alexis to get her back and asks Liam to keep an eye on Jocelyn, who has now gone silent. Left alone, Liam watches Jocelyn get up and walk toward the other side of the fence. He tries to stop her, but he starts choking on his food. Jocelyn finally sees her father, John, walking towards her. While she approaches him, the jester shows up to Liam and starts showing him a trick, including 3 cups. Jocelyn watches her childhood version approaching John and having a beautiful moment with him, seeing which she gets perplexed. At the back, the jester lifts up 1 cup and reveals he's plucked all of Liam's teeth. Liam starts spilling blood from his mouth and starts shouting, "Clueless." He lifts the 2nd cup up and reveals he's now taken out both of Liam's eyeballs. Liam rushes to Maddie and Alexis in this condition and falls on top of Maddie, which scares everyone around. When John turns back into a corpse and leaves, Jocelyn goes after him. Alexis and Maddie try to stop her, but the jester breaks Alexis's knee with his cane and silences the other using his magic. He then hunts down Emma, who is tired of running away from him on the streets. Midway through all that, she receives a call from the jester posing as her mother. As the mother speaks, the jester appears and synchronizes his signs with the mother's voice that only Emma's hearing on the phone. The voice exaggerates her bad behaviors and suggests committing suicide, just like John. At the last minute, Emma mentally strengthens herself and breaks out of the trap. She decides to find Jocelyn and make things right with her, but the jester shows her a projection of John standing over the bridge. She runs to John, apologizing and regretting not talking to him the night he committed suicide. However, the jester's curse shows her the brutal reality when John furiously blames her for his death. He takes off the rope knot and puts it in Emma's neck, claiming she should die for what she's caused him. Emma is choked with the rope mid-air and then thrown into a cemetery, where she finds Jocelyn's childhood version. The little girl humbly asks Emma to show her the way to her father, but Emma rages out at her and curses her for stealing her father away from her. Suddenly, there's a change in Jocelyn's demeanor when she refers to Emma as John's mistake. Subsequently, little Jocelyn sees John standing on the other side of the cemetery, so she walks to him and disappears. The jester pops up from there and invites Emma in. When she comes inside, she watches John carving out pumpkins with little Jocelyn and making memories. John rages out at Emma, claiming he was young when he made the mistake of conceiving her, and no matter how hard he tried to move on from that mistake, Emma's thoughts always lurked over his head. John turns into a corpse, and Jocelyn becomes her adult version. Emma cries and tries to get validation from Jocelyn, but she also ends up spilling truthful facts about her in a very rude manner. In the end, John unburdens himself of Emma by stabbing himself with a knife. Jocelyn takes out the knife and gives it to Emma, while telling her to take her life with it. She also tells Emma to wake up, but she ends up stabbing Jocelyn with the knife. When Emma breaks out of the fabrication, she realizes she's stabbed Jocelyn in real life, while the jester cheers. Emma cries over the stabbed Jocelyn and patches things with her, which makes the jester walk away. In the end, Emma is seen visiting her father's grave and settling things with him in order to make peace with herself, all while the jester watches her from a distance. She narrates that the jester is an eternal curse passed on to her by John since she is his blood. The film ends with Emma visiting Jocelyn at the bar, who's now fully recovered. I hope you liked it. Please comment down on what you liked about this movie and what scene you liked. Don't forget to subscribe and see you in our next video.